conversations we've had, but for those people who haven't been, my name is Sid Smith, and I'm retired from the University of Michigan as a professor in English and Women's and Gender Studies. So anyway, it's been my pleasure to do the last 3 weeks of conversation, and we have a last one today on mission. And I forgot to do this before, is to say hello to the people who come in online, and nice to have you with me. Okay, so we're going to have a conversation about what we mean when we talk about mission. Unlike the last 3 weeks, I'm not going to go through kind of comparative religion piece at the beginning, because I tried to do that and then it got too complicated about what these other religions, kind of how they thought about moving out into the world and spreading news. So we're just going to stick with Christianity today. And we're going to start with something that's called, people call Christianity, especially evangelicals, one of the missionary religions. That mission is central to it, and it's central because it was tied to certain passages in the New Testament, including this one, of course, and this one is, I had never heard this. Maybe many of you have heard this phrase, the Great Commission. So it was interesting for me to discover there is the Great Commission that's tied to Matthew 28:18-20. And Jesus came and said to them, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go, therefore, and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you." So given that that's at the center, already, right after the death of Jesus, there was a sense of the mission and the great mission of going out, and I guess we would call it evangelizing. So, this is my computer. Why isn't it not? Okay. Okay. You're taking the blame?
I'll sit next to you, and then they'll think I did it.
Oh, escape. Okay. Now let me go down and see if I can start it again over here. And sorry about this. I thought we had solved this last week, but okay.
So
It needs to go on.
which slide you can just click it.
I'm going to click on that one. Okay, now let me put it up here. As you know, I like to go out and find interesting artworks to kind of add some color. Pam is always talking to me about how she's not a visual person, so she doesn't understand the artwork. But anyway,
that's rather clear.
This is clear, right? So this is just a mosaic in an Eastern church of the disciple, the Apostle Paul. So let's talk a little bit about the dispersal of the apostles themselves. After the death of Jesus, they were no longer called, the ones who were going out on the road were no longer called disciples, they were called apostles, because they were out and spreading the word. So you have the first Philip baptizing a Jewish man in Ethiopia. You have Peter preaching to the Gentiles in 39 CE. Mark goes to Egypt in 42 CE, and he actually is very important as the apostle that articulated more of a concept of the three-in-one God, the triune God. And partly it spoke to a lot of people in Egypt because of the Egyptian religion having these triads in the religion at the top, the gods and the goddesses. So, and then Paul is going out to Tarsus, or he was in Tarsus. He's going out into modern-day Turkey. The Jerusalem Council in 49 votes on or concurs with admitting Gentiles into the church. That's very important because that meant your catchment of who you were going to go out and evangelize for and with, and to is much larger. Paul begins a second missionary trip to Turkey and modern-day Greece. Thomas goes out to India and founds the Indian Orthodox Church. And that's why there's a Christian part of India on the west coast of the southern part of India. Paul goes out in 54 on a third missionary trip. He actually is sent to Rome under guard, but he evangelizes on the way there on the island of Malta. You have Thaddeus establishing the Christian church further east in Armenia. And then 72 is, it's not clear whether it was the actual year of Thomas's martyrdom in India, but sometime around there, Thomas was martyred. So you have the apostles are already out there. They're as far away as Ethiopia, Armenia, up into Greece, all the way to Rome, and down to Egypt. So they are evangelizing in the whole area of the Mediterranean. Now, what do you need to have a mission or to be a missionary religion? And it's interesting to think about the ingredients that would go into this. You need to have passionate feet on the ground. That's just a given. And that's when the apostles are out there. They've got their passionate feet on the ground. You have you have to have, for the religion to spread, you have to have a decision about whether Gentiles could become Christian or whether they had to become Jewish first and then become Christian. And so there was the decision among the early Christians that you could go directly to the Gentiles. They didn't have to be routed through the Jewish religion. You had to have a fairly stable political environment. Now, the Roman Empire wasn't stable for everybody, especially the people they were putting to death and turning into slaves, but it was a relatively stable world order for the first 200-300 years after the death of Jesus. You have to have a relatively common language. Okay, and this is why the early church, the language of the early church became Koine Greek, because Greek was the lingua franca of the Mediterranean world. Even for the Romans, they knew Greek. The Ptolemies were Greeks ruling Egypt into the 100, 200, well, it was spoken in Greece up until 600 CE. So you have to have this common language. You have to have copies of a sacred text. You have to have something that people can carry with them, that they can have as they're proselytizing, or that they can leave in a community. So that means you have to have literate people, you have to have scribes, you have to have papyri production, you have to have access to, easy access to some kind of writing material. And so they were taking out, I note on here that the Alexandrian Jews, that is the Jews who were living or who went to Alexandria, which was the city that Alexandria the Great built in northern Egypt. He started the library, the Great Library at Egypt. So Hebrew scholars came to Alexandria to translate the Bible into Greek coin. And that was before the time of Jesus, but the translation had already taken place, so that the Bible, parts of the Bible, were in a different language or in the common language of the era. And then you have to be building critical institutions. Early on, the homes of people were the places that became the worship spaces. And at that point, women were very important in the early days of converting others, of bringing the news, because it was often happening in their homes. But then the church, there was the beginning of the building of the institutions in the churches that were outside of homes. And that became a moment in the history of the early church where the importance of women was muted, because then it was that the hierarchy of the male hierarchy of the church started. And then you have to have a potent message. And people talk about the potency of the message of Christianity. It is a narrative, or it brings a narrative of suffering, but also moral justice, of salvation, and of the imminent end of the world. That was a part of it for hundreds and hundreds of years. And it still is with certain churches. So all of this kind of infrastructure, the infrastructure of missionary work, had to be available and had to keep providing the means through which people could keep moving, keep expanding on where they were reaching, how far they were reaching. I just love Caravaggio, so this is just an occasion to put this painting in. It's in Rome. It's the Crucifixion of St. Peter, late Renaissance, but look at these canvases and weep when you see his paintings. But this is what I wanted that painting to point to, the importance of martyrdom to the early church. So that was very, first of all, there were a lot of people being martyred in mass, martyred individually. So there was the reality of the early threat to Christians, and to Christians who were moving around into different communities and spreading the word. But it's important because it means a kind of following in the footsteps of Christ. It's living a dangerous life. It's like, if we think back to Bonhoeffer and talking about hard grace, it's kind of following the way of hard grace and putting one's life on the line. And then, of course, what happens is the places of martyrdom and the people who are martyred become attached to sites to which Christians began to which pilgrims set out on the road to earn a kind of dispensation from the church for all of their sins, because they have gone to the places of martyrdom. So all of these the early apostles who were martyred, but then the religious people after that who came along and were martyred, then the church makes them into saints. So then they have their cathedrals and that are built around them and their impact and their story. So it's kind of the martyrdom of missionary work was a way of threading all these communities together and the geography of expanding Christianity together. Okay, so then in the next 1,400 years, skipping through, So here's what goes on for the next 1,400 years in schematic form. that has to do with missionary work, and even I can't read my what I have up here. So the first is that you've got your feet moving on the ground. Just think of those feet, always on the ground, always moving. Sometimes climbing up into ships and moving a long way away. But you've got that. So you've got on the ground, they're going into Portugal, and they're up into Ireland, they're moving into Scandinavia, they've converted, the German Huns have been converted, they're moving across to, the Holy Roman Empire is shifted to, before it was Istanbul, it was Constantinople, and cathedrals are built, and then it's moving further and into Eastern Europe, then it's in India, and then you begin to have the people going to China and to Japan. So you've got this movement across. But you have individual and community conversions taking place. So conversion is taking place both locally and then on the kind of frontiers of the Christian influence. You have churches organizing hierarchies and bureaucracies. You have the official Bible being established. So that's the kind of institution of the church, what's needed for the institution of the church. You have monasteries being built all across the lands that are being impacted by the spread of Christianity. And in those monasteries, you have all these scribes, translators, writers. It's the production of the sacred texts that are used. So you have to have that set up. You have kings and rulers being converted and entire kingdoms being converted. So Constantine is converted in 350 or 380. I don't know exactly what the date is. It's around then. And then you have the Roman Empire becoming the Holy Roman Empire and being converted itself. Then the split in the Eastern and Western Church and the church proper moving over to Constantinople. You have the saints and martyrs being canonized. You have the traveling orders. The orders of the church are starting to emerge, like the Jebbies, the Jesuits, the Black Robes, as they were called, or the Dominicans, the Hounds of God. Or you've got the Franciscans. So you have these powerful orders that are being constituted, and then they are moving out. You have the Gutenberg invention of the printing press becomes really important. That's 1452. You have the church being militarized in alliances with a lot of the major world powers. The King of Spain, France, Germany, the smaller kingdoms in, or they weren't called kingdoms in Italy, but whatever they were. And you have pilgrims on the road journeying to sacred sites, and they're going to the Holy Land, and they're going to St. James Compostela, and they're going to Rome. And you have new technologies of circumnavigation of the earth. That becomes one of the most important set of things that happened for the church, because that's how they could begin to move out beyond the spreading Indo-European area. So I also like the history of maps. So I thought I'd just show you the difference between a map. This is Ptolemy's map from 150 CE. So it's an early map of the Mediterranean. But then by 1520, this is one of the, this is Johannes Schoner's globe. It shows the misconceptions the Europeans had of all the islands out there between North America and China. But you can see how it's filled in. The globe is filling in, so that when the explorers slash conquerors are starting off, they have the kind of map work that they need. They've already got the astrolabe and some of the early instrumentation for the big ships. So you need all of that. So then what you get to is missionaries' conquest and colonization, which is what the church is doing for 500, 600 years. And so here's these are just out of some texts from the 15th century or the 16th century, the Jesuits in China and the Jesuits in Brazil. The Jesuits were moved all the way across. They were in Canada, in the what's now the upper United States. They went all to Japan. They went to China. They went to Brazil. They went to all of South America. And so, because I tend not to see the upside of missionary work and in its relationship to colonization, but I figured I ought to say something good about missionary work. So this was the hardest slide to do, what? Yeah. So you have the expansion of Christianity around the globe. That's, if you're interested in that, that's a good thing. The care of the sick at its best, the work of transcribing the Bible into different languages. And sometimes in the process of doing that, some of the religious people that were out in the various colonies, lands of conquest, would also record rudimentary language from the groups that they were running into. Okay, I'll get to the downside of that, but the upside is that they preserved some of the languages that they were wiping out. Okay, there's curiosity with some curiosity about and grappling with differences of culture and belief systems and social processes. So there are some works from some of the early missionaries, the Catholic missionaries that go out in Latin America, that will talk about what they've learned from the indigenous people. So there's a little bit of that. They also sometimes gain some knowledge about local conditions, local medicines, for instance, local customs. They also sent narratives back. They wrote about the journeys. They wrote about their experiences in these various conquered lands. And they circulate, because the printing press then, they circulated broadly. So they were sending information back to Europe about what was going on in the rest of the world. And they did occasionally end up having debates about certain issues. Later on, this would be a debate about slavery, for instance. Debates about certain issues that might have had some impact on what was happening in terms of the development of thought and belief and philosophical systems and theology in Europe. So we could say that that's kind of the upside. Now, I want to show you a document from one of the religious, I never know whether to call them priests or, anyway, in North America. This is a map of New Mexico. You can see this is a pretty good map of New Mexico. It's a map from 1710. I found this on a really interesting website at the National Humanities Center. They have a project there that's on early writing coming out of missionary work around the world. And so you can go in, punch and go into documents and see various documents from that site. So this is Father Alonso de Benavides. He's writing back to King Philip of Spain, 1630. I just want you to, I want to read this because it captures one of the very ominous signs of what was happening in missionary work around the world. Okay. Well, all this land is full of great treasures, namely, very rich and prosperous silver and gold mines. So they've already been discovered in, sorry. Ugh, I don't know why that happens. Okay, let me go to this one. Down in this area near Socorro, there were all kinds of mines back in the day. And applying a little diligence, as an intelligent person will do, we did indeed discover these mines. We gave him endless thanks for this, blah, blah, blah. The ease with which silver may be taken from this range is the greatest in all the Indies. It would be wiser to extract 8 ounces of silver here than many more ounces from other places. Elsewhere, mining materials and supplies must be hauled from great distances to a source of water, which is certainly necessary to extract silver anywhere. But in these mines, blah, 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 everything is available. And although it is true that at the beginning of our conversions, we simply tried to get Indian labor for the mines, I now believe that, all things considered, the mines should be administered only by moderately greedy persons. These administrators should treat the Indians well and pay them for their work, paying close attention from the outset to their rather simple capacities and their lackadaisical work habits. Not only should they be gathered up to perform these labors, but they should also be gently guided down the proper road, compelled to follow our way of doing things and our speech. And that kind of captures the arrogance, righteousness, ignorance, superiority, maternalism, paternalism, colonialism, and imperialism that followed in the wake of the movement of the missionaries around the world. Okay, so here's the toll of this work. The genocide of contact, such as European diseases. A lot of people were wiped out by this. Now that would have happened with conquest. But the church and the state, like in the Portuguese Empire and the Spanish Empire, they were like this, moving out around the world. The enslavement and forced labor of indigenous persons, the transportation of enslaved Africans in and through the Atlantic Triangle, that was the route from England down to Africa over to the New World, the extraction of wealth for crown and church, the forced conversion, sometimes at gunpoint or in exchange for survival, the destruction of cultural artifacts, the imposition of the colonial language, the suspicion of the failure to value, suspicion of and failure to value indigenous knowledge, beliefs, and cultural practices. And we know that we lost a lot of knowledge, certainly across the Americas, in terms of what happened with the conquest and its aftermath. The cultural tropes of primitivism and the development of this notion of the rankings of human beings from the almost inhuman up to the greatest apogee of humanity, which was the white male European man, obviously a white male man. So you have that and the sense that everybody who was considered primitive there are a whole set of descriptors that attach to that, and mostly having to do with the less than fully human. Okay. Obviously, the privileging of whiteness and European values, the complicity in sanctioning violence and slaughter by the colonial powers, and the circulation in travel and settlement narratives. Now, I told you there were a lot of narratives that came out of all this circumnavigation of the globe. Some of them are very interesting and show an attempt to try and understand what the peoples are, and certainly a lot of them were done by not so much early on, but in the late 17th or 18th and the 19th century, done by scientists as well, who were going out and bringing a lot of information back about other places in the globe. But for many of them, they are circulating narratives of degrading and dehumanizing tropes of difference. Okay, so in one of those, this is to get some literature in here, something from Motana, the essayist, very important thinker of the 17th century. He has this very famous essay his pieces of writing are ESSAIS in the French, on cannibals. If you're interested, you can find that online. It's an interesting piece to read, because part of the justification for wiping out practices in the conquered lands was that you could talk in South America about people being cannibals. Obviously less than human, not much further above the animals. So he writes this essay where he takes to task how it is that these people in other places in the world have been represented as cannibals. And he writes, "There is nothing savage or barbarous about those people, but that every man calls barbarous anything he is not accustomed to." And the invention, and then they, and this time he's referring to all the people that are writing about their experiences in these other places. They never represent things to you simply as they are, but rather as they appeared to them, or as they would have them appear to you, and to gain the reputation of men of judgment, and the better to induce your faith, are willing to help out the business with something more than is really true of their own invention. And that's the I hate to use this phrase because it's tarnished now, but the fake news that is being sent back about all these places. So what do we do? I mean, we live with this legacy. We can say as Protestants that maybe the Presbyterians
You can say it, it's okay.
no,
You work here.
no, that they were a part of the Protestant churches that moved out across the North American continent, and you know what happened when they met the indigenous people. They turned those people into savages that were less than human, and anyway, that happened all the way across the country, up from Spain in the south part, and up from Mexico through Spain, both across the bottom in Florida. And so it is a legacy that we have. And it's a legacy, I think, unfortunately held in the word mission. And so what would it mean? Christianity is a global religion now. Growth is coming from Africa and Asia and South America. What does this mean for the work associated with mission? Will the U.S. become a place to which the church elsewhere sends missionaries? Well, they're sending their priests and they're sending their people to take over the church, to become leaders in churches, because it's certainly in the Catholic Church. Yeah, Pam.
Slowed it down a little bit when we separated church from state.
Mm-hmm.
So that's part of the reason it's scary to think about that happening.
Yeah, 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 yes. So, so here's some questions, and I'd like us to munch on these. Maybe pick one of them and just jot a few things down, okay? So, mission work without the message. Is it, now, I am using the word mission here. I'm going to come to a slide where I suggest we might want to try other terms for what it is we want to do. But mission work without the message, mission work, what is the message? And mission work and social justice, what is the relationship? So could you just pick one? Don't try or maybe just break up in small groups and chat a little bit about one of them, okay?
Should we just turn to our neighbor?
Yeah, turn to your neighbor, and if you,
Which one do you want to? Probably the last one.
I can't stay for
Yeah,
a
yeah.
minute, but I wanted to tell you the story of a while back at this church, a group of people joined from a more conservative tradition.
yeah.
I think they thought they were going to like it.
Okay. So hold the energy for a little bit. I just want to go through a couple other things, and then we'll return to this. I just want to I'm going to come back to that one, but I just want to raise this question about what is the catchment, or is this work on a continuum, like outside the country, within the U.S., in Ann Arbor and surrounding areas, within the church itself? Is it interspecies? Do we have obligations to other species? Do we have obligations to the earth, an eco-mission? So this is an attempt to kind of say that there's like a continuum that we could think about doing this work on. And then I want to throw out some phrases. This was just me. It's not anything important. It's just I was trying to figure out, if we don't use the word mission, what would we use? Can we give it up or not, the word? So then you might have come up with some ideas on what we might call this work, but I just put these down: compassion work, communal compassion, active justice, earth justice, communal justice, whatever. No one phrase is going to capture all of what we might have on in our heads about this, but is it time to jettison the use of the word mission for something else in this church? Not that this is in this church. Yeah.
Having worked in mission and local mission for a lot of years, currently we talk about groups that we're interacting with around certain needs. We talk about them, people, as partners, and so partnership is what we talk about when we interact with local mission groups, and we call them partners.
Okay. So I'm just going to put down partnerships. Now I want to just throw out some other things. I know I do this too often, but mission work and the digital world, mission work and AI. I should have put that on the list of the continuum, because we're going to be in the AI realm as well in this. So I'm just throwing that out. And then I want to come back to, this comes up from your commenting on partnership, because part of the concern is the last one here, the issue of what is being conveyed or what is being exchanged in such work, whatever the work is called. What is exchanged in the work? What is the gift that comes back? What is who are the beneficiaries of this kind of work? We are the beneficiaries of it. We think the other is the beneficiary. We are giving benefits to another, to the other. So these are some issues about that are captured in just trying to shift to the word partnership. The power dynamics, the kind of those coming in their cars from outside of Detroit and coming and working someplace. That's a symbolic message. You can't escape from those situations, but how you conceptualize it and how the language you use and the mode of the exchange that takes place then becomes really important. The role of compassion, or sympathetic identification. And for those of you who were here last time, you might remember I said something about sympathetic identification can be just a way that people say they have an experience through which they can say, oh, by the grace of God, that's not me. I'm not that, I don't have that experience. I'm not in that situation. That makes me feel a little better. I can identify with it, but I identify with it through my own identity structures and my own cultural frameworks. So I was trying to get at something trying to find some people refer to the word compassion as a way of getting away from that sense of empathetic identification. I feel, it's like, what's the word that comes after I feel? For you, I feel with you, I feel through you, I feel despite of you, I feel, that how it is we describe even the verbs and the predicates. That's not a predicate. What is of to? Preposition. It's propositional ethics. Instead of propositional ethics. Propositional ethics. That's an English teacher speaking. Okay, so all of these things are on the table. Now, I'm interested in what you were thinking about in your groups. Yeah, Susan.
Well, we talked a little bit about, we were talking about mission work and social justice, and talking about both going against the historical trend to go to a group, right?
Mm-hmm.
But also to be trying to provide something to, and what if the core of what the descendant project from Mission was curiosity and listening
Mm-hmm.
to others.
That's why all these people are getting hearing aids.
Yeah.
So they can put curiosity into practice. I didn't mean you. These are the new hearing aid people here.
So, did you want to say anything more?
No, I propose that it's sort of an element of paternalism or maternalism that you're going to a group and assuming that you have something that they need in the back of your mind, whether you say it or not, to put the shoe on the other foot. But if a group from a historically black church someplace outside this area comes into this area and says, "Look, we want to listen to you. We want to find out what your needs are. How would we feel? How would we react to that?" So that's the other side. You have to just take it away from just what would we do as a missionary, how would we accept somebody, and look at it. That puts them into the framework of how they're going to feel when you're coming in and asking them for a reaction. You're asking something as if your answer is going to give them something that allows them to give you something you need. I'm not saying it well. You see the whole.
No, you aren't. But
two ways.
But we also sort of came to language about that somehow an invitation to relationship is what we're after.
That's the best goal.
Bill, were you I mean, we can't assume that we know what other people need either. That's the big thing. In the past, we've often say, "Oh, this is what you need," and go and listen, like you said, and interact and relate and partner. And they may want something totally different than what we assume they need or want.
They might want to give us a piece of their minds.
Yeah, and I could tell you stories from past mission work where people didn't do that, and it ended up being not good.
yeah, yeah. Some of the conversations over here.
Go for it, Sarah. Go for it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go for it, Sally.
What?
What we talked about.
Oh,
She's listening.
I was just using an anecdote from my work life that addressed what you're talking about completely. I was a welfare worker during the Great Society when they overturned the welfare system. And they divided, well, I'll just use ADC for the present. They divided it up into income maintenance and service. But then no guidelines came down whatsoever from the government about what a service unit was in the welfare department. And so a couple of us said, well, we can't do nothing forever here, so we'll just do one for you. So my unit had about 7 people, and we all sat down, and not one of us had any notion of what a service unit should look like. And finally I said, I guess we're going to have to ask them. So we visited every client we had. And of course, that was the time when people really still did midnight raids. There were people still asking me why I wasn't looking in their refrigerator. I said, I'm never looking in your refrigerator. This is not my business. So we went out and asked them, what they thought of the idea. And of course, they were extraordinarily skeptical. But they finally said, really, we just want, from your standpoint, what is it you want us to do? And what is it you want us to stop doing? And then we polled them to see how many of them would let us in the door to help us out. What percent do you think, out of a whole caseload, what percent of the clientele do you think would let us come in and enter into this new project with us?
10.
18%. 18% was actually probably
That's
pretty
not
good
pretty
now that I
bad.
look back at it.
Yeah, that's not bad.
It really worked, as well as anything you'd expect to work in a large federal program. Better, probably. But it was all about, we were truly clueless. So we went out there, we didn't go out with any attitude of superiority because we had no idea what they wanted or needed.
So that's, I'm just putting inventorying needs. Other ideas that came out of your conversations or concerns or issues or?
Well, I think one of the things that bothers me about many, what we call missions, is that we go in someplace and do something and we leave. And how can we be with people in need? How can we change that? I don't know how to change it, but it feels bad to leave.
Well, and I think that there's been a lot written in the Christian literature about this very thing.
Yeah.
That we send our youth or
Yes.
adults, whatever, and we go into these spaces to help, supposedly to help, but that those endeavors often end up exploiting those people in some form or other
Yes.
for our feel-good reasons, right?
Right.
We went and
Yeah.
we painted these buildings for a week and we left, and so there's been a lot of criticism in the Christian press for our approach to all of that, because it is a way of taking advantage of people in a way, in order for us to feel like we're doing our Christian
So
thing.
it's kind of outsourcing of the training of young people and how they should feel about other places in the world,
Yeah.
without any study of that place in the world, without deep historical knowledge about it, and then about the feel-good side of it.
Yeah.
You
It's
know,
often at our
one thing along
convenience, not at the
At-
convenience
yes.
of the
Yes.
other. Yeah.
I think one of the
That's
things that,
local too.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah,
we have this day, we want to do something.
Yeah, tell us what we can
Make
do.
something for us to come and do,
Yeah.
which can be
one of the, my understanding, one of the things about Presbyterian disaster assistance, is that we do stay. There's still disaster assistance opportunities for folks who want to work in New Orleans for what happened down there with the hurricanes. So I guess my point is the fact that in the past we have, gone in and then left. It really is a fundamental part of PDA that they stay as long as they're doing something meaningful there.
Well, and that brings up a point too, Bill, that it's important. often we don't have to create something to do. We can work with already well-established groups like
Yes.
That's
PCA
right.
to do
Partner
things.
with them.
Partner, it's another, yeah.
It's like we did last year with the Jewish Community
Yeah.
Services for the refugees.
Absolutely.
I think probably the biggest change in mission work that I can remember since when I started out 55, 60 years ago was that we no longer send missionaries anywhere. We
Right.
accept invitations to come, but you won't find a missionary being sent to Mexico because they don't want us anymore.
I'd like to offer that we might be able to see mission in prayer too, because prayer can be powerful. And like I'm so concerned about the people of Gaza and their turmoil. And I think sometimes, I guess today I decided that praying that they know we're here and that we're watching what's happening and that they do well. And mostly just I would like them so much to just know that we know about them. And that we care, and I can pray about that. And it seems so frivolous sometimes, and like you're not really accomplishing anything. But I think we need to consider that too when we're talking about mission.
And that reminds me of thinking, I mean, I had that on that list about what the continuum is. People in the church are, we practice compassion with people in the church. That's the intimate kind of the small scale environment in which we're trying to do the work of this community, and so that's and people pray for other people in the church, and also then, as you suggest, praying for the people elsewhere that you're concerned about. The thing about thinking about our own, we are the recipients of the compassion that the community hopes to provide, is that we are the beneficiaries of that mission. If we use the word mission, we are the beneficiaries of that compassion. That's probably a good thing to remind ourselves of. Instead of this going elsewhere and seeing other people as they are the beneficiaries of our beneficence. So, Pam, did you?
I'll let you finish.
No.
Okay,
Okay, and then I'll get you.
I was in charge of a volunteer program at a historical village, and I was also part of a professional volunteer coordinator group, and we would talk about issues about volunteers. And essentially, across the board, people can do things for maybe a couple of years before they lose interest or want to go to something else. So I think we have to take this into consideration when we talk about coming and going and coming and going. And I like the idea of having an institution like Circles, which Helena is involved in, and I was at one time also, because we need that structure in order to keep volunteers coming in and out. At the village, I never ever went out asking for volunteers. They all came to me because the village was a wonderful place to be. And I think if the church becomes that wonderful place to be, that people will see it and come, and that's really what you want. So how can we put on that, how can we become that place that a person wants to be?
Just seems like we should remember about the wonderful going to somewhere and staying is the nursing school in Haiti.
Yeah, thank you.
I mean, Haiti.
That's great.
That is
That's
a
amazing.
lasting. I mean, what's happening there now?
Yeah.
But
And the power that those nurses have.
yeah,
Like they wouldn't have here.
That's
I
right.
mean, they're like doctors there, right?
yeah,
And maybe their only, source of
Right.
medical help.
that yes. I mean, that was a big part of the Haiti mission. There were other parts of that with the hospital in Lopitan San. I forgot the name of it. Anyway, Leogan, and then the Pazapa, and people have continued to be donors to that, and that's a way of a lasting contribution too. Yeah, Susan.
Just one last thing I wanted to throw in is that when we talk about, say, social justice, that there is so much that we in the most wealthiest and most powerful country in the world could do to push to change the conditions that results in the needs that we want to go and help.
Yes.
The social justice task force that we have, it's that I thought of this when you mentioned Mexico, it just randomly popped into my head, but okay, if we are doing work to help move toward debt relief for countries around the world, that is going to change the conditions in a way that us going in and helping paint something is not going to change.
I mean, and that's a call to having a structural component to whatever project we're doing. That is to call attention to the structural issues that need addressing, and to figure out ways that people can address them in respectful ways, but also, with their pocketbooks or with their time. But the conversation always about the structural issues that are involved in the locations. Yeah, that's it. Other things, yeah, Bill.
Well,
If we pray for the Haitians or the Gazans, but they don't know about it, are we really praying? Or is it something else?
What does that mean? What? What do you say?
If we don't include them, they don't know we're praying for them.
They don't have to know that. Do they have to know that we're praying for them?
Yes.
I mean, people can have a difference of opinion on that.
Right. If you think of prayer as an energy, and energy goes everywhere, there's that point of view. Right?
Yeah, there's that. I mean, it's how people understand prayer. And just like suffering, grace, and God and mission, it'll be a little bit different. It's 5 after. Do you have
I was just thinking that you two are talking about different levels of prayer. And you're talking about relationship, which is really important. You're talking about overall. And there's a place for all of that. But if you want to let people think of you back, and it's a real strength there. If they don't know, it's okay, and it's fine, and it should be done. But that relationship gives strength to the process.
Yeah.
A quickie response to one of your earlier slides, you asked us what to call it.
Yeah.
And I am very much drawn to the word communal, because we know everybody has such a deep need to belong to community. And it's a way of entering into collaboration and helpfulness without any sort of official name to it. If people understand that we are part of a community, we're all getting through this life together, it casts a different feeling on the whole enterprise.
You mentioned the word donations, and I think that we don't always have to go somewhere and do sometimes they need our money more than they need our presence.
That's a reality.
Yeah.
Right. Right. Okay. Thank you all. This has been a great series.
Thank you.
A 4-part series. It's just been wonderful. And I'm Margie Reynolds. I'm part of the faith formation, and so is Sid. And actually, she volunteered for this. Yeah, it's been wonderful. And we have. I want to revisit pieces of it. This last one is just sort of got me started. I hope we can continue that conversation. But thank you. And I want to acknowledge you with a little gift.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
You know what they need.
Yeah, a candle. Okay.
I think
It's very nice. They
It's a
give the
nice
speakers a little gift now. So,
Thanks to Jane Dutton.
so it's a, thanks to Jane Dutton.
Yeah.
Yes, Jane bought these. This is her mission work. Full of thanks. That's so Jane. Full of thanks. But thank you for coming. I mean, and thank you for entering into these conversations in ways that I hoped would happen. Just, thinking through these, raising the questions, kind of shifting your way of understanding something. So it's been a pleasure. Thank you all.
Did you learn something?
I did learn a lot, yeah.
Awesome.
Yes, I mean, I did. Yeah, I'm not gonna miss it much, but like I'm glad I don't have, I don't know, hell and damnation on next week. But it's been very meaningful to me to do this. It's been meaningful to me.
Well, it's been
So-
meaningful to us.
So,
And so
and fun to do the research.
you can watch the reruns anytime
Oh,
you want.
yeah. In my sleep. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
This is great. Thank you so much.
I didn't mean to